Murloc Shaman. I'm 12 and 8 with it, with the more aggressive version after I switched from my mid-range version, which was, I think, 14 and 12, which wasn't quite as good. But anyway, Murloc Shaman, depending on how you want to build it, whether mid-range or overload or full-on aggro, all of them are pretty good. So here's just a quick deck guide, and I'll go over a couple of the other builds briefly. For the most part, I will cover the aggro full-on Murloc build. For those of you who don't know how these deck guides work, it's basically just overview of the deck, changes you can make to the deck, and then matchups and mulligans. So without further ado, I'll just jump into it. First one is the overview of the deck. Basically, you just want to flood the board with Murlocs and pump them up as much as you can. Dropping Soul of the Murlocs sometimes, if you can get a wide enough board and you have some mana floating around, drop that whenever you have like 3+ minions so you can at least get some value out of it. And yeah, turn 3 is when you can pump up minions, pump up your Murlocs. Unfortunately, sometimes they don't always stick on the board, so you sometimes want to hold them back, but just to keep up with tempo, sometimes you're kind of just forced to play them in general, which kind of sucks, but sometimes you just gotta do it, man. Other than that, this deck has some pretty decent value with Hagatha, and if you can play the Underbelly Angler and combo off, you can get a ton of value later on with Hagatha. With Skargil, you can flood the board with 7 Murlocs if you get the Angler and just endlessly produce them, which is strong. If you have Skargil, you can play 10 Murlocs on turn 10 by playing Skargil, and then 6 1-drop Murlocs because he makes all Murlocs cost 1, so it has late game potential. That's some okay removal with the Tox Fin, which can actually combo pretty well with the Bluegill Warrior, which is why I went run 1, but I'll get to that a little bit later when I talk about changes. It's just got pretty much everything you could ever need in a deck. It has early game potential, it has late game potential, it has mid game potential. It's got some removal with the poisonous. It's got a lot of options. But you see, here are some changes you can make to the deck, and the changes will be a lot. Okay, don't get me wrong. These changes, there are a lot of them, to say the least, and it just depends on how you actually want to end up playing the deck, because I don't know how to explain it other than there's an aggro deck, an overload deck, and like a kind of late game to mid-rangey version of the deck that I used to run. So without further ado, I'll just jump into it. The first one is the full-on aggro deck, which you see now. The next one has these changes where you take out Hungry Crab, which I run because it makes the Sludge Slurper, which could get pinged off turn 2. It's actually a really good follow-up play because of the overload. Playing Hungry Crab on turn 2 after you hit with a Sludge Slurper means that you can get a 3/4 on the board after dealing that 2 damage. You get the Lackey anyway, and your Sludge Slurper is going to get pinged off, but you're left with a 3/4. It's a pretty solid play. But you take out Hungry Crab. Also, Hungry Crab can eat Tox Fin after his Battle Cry is done because he's kind of useless. You take out Hungry Crab anyway. Bluegill Warrior, Hench Clan Hogsteed, Hench Clan Sneak, which I only run in here because it's like a 3-drop that I could play if I don't have any control of the board because I don't really care about it. But if you want to get rid of that card for literally anything else, you can go ahead and do that. But those are the 3 big ones. Some people don't run the Hench Clan Hag for wider boards, so if you don't want to do that either, you could take that card out as well. And they replace them with the Overload package, being with Lickums and Lightning Bolts and Zaps and Thunderheads and the 2/4 elemental that every time you play an Overload card, it gets pumped up. I think it's like the Undertaker, Under-Earther elemental, I think it's called, something like that. It starts with Under. Point is, though, it has a similar amount of potential. This deck, though, doesn't run Hagatha either. It actually runs Arena Toads as well, and the Sunreaver War Mage. I'm not actually talking about that deck because I don't like it as much after playing both of them. I like this deck a little bit more. But if you want to run the slightly more mid-range version with Overload and some board wipe and some ways of controlling the board, you can go ahead and do that. Late game version runs Stormbringer, both Hagathas, Rain of Toads. It's kind of like the Overload package, but like committed a little bit harder. Less Murlocs. You really only use Murlocs to like combo with the Angler. You don't even necessarily get too much early pressure. You use it more for like a late game takeover kind of thing, you know? Where you use some Murlocs early to deal with his board, and then you dump a ton of Murlocs later on in the game and get a ton of value out of Hagatha and Skargil once you make it to that point, and you have like Lightning Storm in it as well. It's a pretty decent, weird deck that's I don't see a lot of people playing. If they do play Murloc, it's the Overload or full Murloc version, but this deck is also playable. But yeah, generally what you want to do is take out Bluegill Warrior, Hogsteed, Hagatha as well, the Hungry Crab, maybe the Acidic Swampoos if you're not afraid of getting hit by the weapons, and the Henge Clan Sneak. Okay, so going into matchups, which I think is the most important part of this, which is why I save it for the end, so you guys stick around. Token Druid is your worst matchup, or one of, because of the fact that he can go wide just as effectively, if not more effectively, but also can restabilize really well after. Like, you can restabilize the board once you get to like turn 8 really easily with like Skargil or the Underbelly Angler with like some of the Ghostlight Anglers with Echo, so you can get a ton of value. That's a really good play, but it's a bit too late. Token Druid can refill the board turn 4 with Whispering Woods, turn 8, and turn 9, and with another Whispering Woods, he can do it again. And with the squirrels and the what's it called? With the squirrels and the landscaping, he can do it as well. With the Dreamway Guardians, he can do it. What else? With the Crystal Song Portal, oh, he can get so many cards. Sometimes they're not great, but he can get a ton of cards. He has a decent amount of removal with Wrath, especially if you can combo with the Keeper Steladris. Like, there's just so much stuff they have to deal with against him that since you can't burst him down in the same way that Tempo Rogue does, if he's able to control your board and get out a wider board than you are, you're probably just going to lose the game, which is why it's a bad matchup. Next one is Hunter. You kind of beat Mech Hunter because you can go wide and fast. And sure, he wants to set up, but he fully sets up around turn 6-ish once he gets out his first Mechanical Whelp. You'll probably get set up by like turn 4 or 5 and start blasting him in the face, which means you can get pretty good pressure before anything even happens. So, honestly, I'd say that Death Rattle and Mech Hunter are pretty good for you. Only one that's bad is Midrange Hunter because of the fact that he has Spring Paws, Timberwolves, he runs the Henge Clan Hogsteed because it's a beast, and Unleash the Hounds, and Tundra Rhino, and Unleash the Beast. Like, so many ways of dealing with your board, along with the Headhunter's Hatchet, that he can just kind of run away with it. Spell Mage and Summon Mage are not bad for you, actually, because it takes him a while. It takes him, again, turn 6 before he really starts getting underway, where you can play the Mountain Giant and then split him. And by that time, you'll probably have a pretty decent board. Not only that, but if the Summoner Mage plays like a Mountain Giant planning to split him next turn, you can Toxfin Poisonous to kill it off, so you can actually split it, which is a nice little counterplay right there. And then after that, you just take control of the game. Paladin's weird. I don't know. Generally, you beat most of the matchups because he just doesn't get as wide of a board as you. You can Toxfin to kill any of his superly like magnetized mechs, and same thing as Mage and Hunter. It just takes him a little while to build up because he has to magnetize a ton of things. Priest is too slow. You can just run him down. Rogue is a bad matchup for you because he has Backstab with a dagger, or Deadly Poison Dagger, or SI Agent Dagger to kill your War Leader or any of your 3 health minions, assuming that you can pump them up to be 3 health, or pretty much anything like that. Murlocs are squishy, man. The Tidecaller can straight up die to a Backstab, which costs 0. Like, he doesn't need to use a card in his turn to actually deal with it. He just kind of dinks it with Backstab, and that can proc a combo, so he gets even more value after killing one of your minions. It's just a mess. And then if you don't have total board control by turn 4, and he plays the Waggle Pick, and then Dread Corsairs, it's basically over. Shaman, pretty 50-50 all the way around, to be honest. I don't think there are any real matchups that are bad for you. Murloc Shaman's obviously a mirror match, but Control Shaman I think is kind of bad because Lightning Storm exists. And again, a lot of your Murlocs have low health, so even if it does 2 damage sometimes, it can actually deal with your board somewhat effectively, which is a bit of a bummer. But I don't know. They have to have Lightning Storm, and if they play it and it's only on a few minions, they overload, you can restabilize the board, and it could be okay, but it's definitely the worst of all the Shaman matchups. Warlock. Zoo Warlock, I think, is your worst matchup, other than potentially Control Warrior. But anyway, actually, no. Tempo Rogue's also terrible for you. But Zoo Warlock's terrible because you want to have minions on the board. If he gets out the Magic Carpet and plays a ton of 1-drops, he kills all of your minions on the board with value, because all the things get +1 attack. So they can value trade in if he has like an Argent Squire that can be like a super value trade because it won't even die. If he plays what's it called? The one that's the 1/3 right now that gives you armor. Crystallizer, something like that. That's a 1/3. He can trade into a 2-attack minion with ease, and it'll still live, and it'll keep the bonus damage. And if it's against a Murloc Tidecaller that's been barely pumped up because you're playing it a little bit late, he can just kill it off before it gets pumped up and not take that much damage. It's just a terrible matchup for you because you can't set up a board to kill him because his turn like 3 or 4, he plays Magic Carpet, starts playing 1-drops, and kills you. Control Warrior is terrible for obvious reasons. He just wipes your board over and over and over again. If you can't burst him early, he gets enough armor and mechs on the board to where you just kind of lose. But yeah, anyway, Mulligans. Mulligans is probably the most important thing. And for that, I say keep basically all of the 1-drops, even the Toxfin. And sometimes you even just play the Toxfin unless you're playing against a deck that you know will have big stuff like Mage, because he'll be Summoner Mage, or like Hunter or Paladin because of the fact that he could magnetize. If you're not playing against any of those, you can play Toxic Fin turn 1 just for some tempo if you don't have any other 1-drops. If you do, though, definitely prioritize the Tidecaller, followed by the Sludge Slurper. And then turn 2, if you have the Sludge Slurper, you can also keep Hungry Crab. It's not actually that big of a deal, because then you hit with a 2/1 and Hungry Crab, as I've already explained. Other cards that you want to keep are the Angler, because, first of all, if he's able to stick on the board if you play him turn 2, you get so much value. And it baits out a ton of removal, and it's just an all-around good card, because a 2/3 for 2 is pretty decent value on its own, let alone its super powerful ability. Henchclan Hogsteed, you definitely want to keep a decent amount of time. Nightmare Amalgam, you want to keep a decent amount of the time. And nothing really above 3, though. Cold Light Seer, if you have a ton of early drops, like say you can get out a 1 and a 2-drop Murloc and follow it with a Cold Light Seer, that's fine. And War Leader is a generally good keep, too. The only issue is against Tempo Rogue. He can kill it so easily on even turn like 2 by Backstab Dagger. If you coin out the War Leader, Backstab Dagger for him just kills you. It's terrible. Or Dagger Deadly Poison. It's terrible. If you're playing against Rogue, I wouldn't necessarily recommend keeping it, but in most other cases, I would. Nightmare Amalgam is actually really good into pretty much every matchup because it's very hard for someone to do 4 damage. Again, Rogue has Eviscerate for 2 mana, but it's less likely that they're going to be able to do that because nobody ever keeps the Eviscerate, but people do keep Backstab a lot, especially into decks that they know are going to be aggro. So, Nightmare Amalgam is definitely your more powerful turn 3 play, and because you lack a powerful standalone 3 play other than the Amalgam, that's why I threw in the Henchclan Sneak. If you want to keep him too, you totally can. That's kind of why I put him in there. It's just, you know, a 3-drop you can play and generally hold on to. I mean, generally keep and play on turn 3 because you just get a ton of value out of it. But yeah, those are the general mulligans. You don't want to keep Bloodlust ever, Hagatha ever, Skargil really you don't want to keep ever. Henchclan Hag's okay because it can develop a wide board, especially if you think you're going to get wiped, so sometimes keep Henchclan Hag. Tasty Fin draws cards, so, like, again, if you're playing against a matchup where you think that you're going to need to drag it on late game, which, again, this deck has because of Skargil and Hagatha, if you don't think you're going to burst them down, this is potentially against Tempo Rogue, where you change strategies and go less for like early aggression because he can deal with his weapon, and go for more of a slower, controlled version, similar to how you would probably deal with a Zulok as well, and maybe even a Token Druid, where you use your Druid Murlocs as like a way to control the board without trying to burst them, without overcommitting to the board or anything, waiting for turn 8 to get Hagatha out, and then you play more Murlocs to get tons of spell value. That's really the only time I could ever see you wanting to keep Hagatha or like Skargil or the draw cards. Is if you plan on playing the game slow to begin with. Other than that, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I like this deck a lot, honestly. Didn't perform as well as some of the other decks like Mech Hunter, sorry, and Token Druid, but it performed a little bit worse than Tempo Rogue overall, which isn't bad because Tempo Rogue is considered one of the best decks in the game. Actually, they're pretty close now looking at my win rates. Actually, Murloc Shaman's slightly higher. I did play less games, though, and I played Tempo Rogue more during Legend than Murloc, and I changed the Murloc deck around a lot, so point is, it's still a very good deck. I've played it in Legend, positive win rate in Legend, and pretty much all of these decks that I'm trying out right now have a positive win rate in Legend, so I definitely recommend you trying out any of them. Biggest plus side about this, if you've made it this long, is it's probably one of the cheapest decks that you can make, except for maybe Midrange Hunter. So yeah, there's that as well. Actually, Token Druid's also hecka cheap. It has like one legendary, the Keeper, and yeah, he's kind of important, but you don't necessarily like need him. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Hope you guys enjoyed. See ya.